Hello and welcome back to Quickflicks, and today we'll be talking about Space Jam: A New Legacy and how I'm not really surprised with the direction it went with this movie. So, first off, I want to start out by giving a sort of retrospective history of the original Space Jam because I feel like my sort of opinion on the new Space Jam is pretty much informed from the old one. I will say this, I'm not a full-on fan of the original either, but the original, I think, is a little better than the sequel in terms of how it approaches the entirety of its whole thing. So let's start off with a brief history of why and how the original film came to be. In the early 90s, Nike wanted to do a cross-promotion with Michael Jordan and Bugs Bunny, and Warner Brothers at the time wasn't necessarily keen on giving out their characters to do that because they feared that if they modernized them, they would dilute the license. However, due to the success of the Nike advertisements between Michael Jordan and Bugs Bunny, it proved a couple things to Warner Brothers. One, cross promotions are always great and are good for the common good of the business, and it will provide easy money. And secondly, they should make a movie out of this. So Ivan Reitman, the producer of Ghostbusters, approached the director of these advertisements and said, "Hey, let's make a film out of this." And so in 1993, as they were about to go and shoot the movie,
I'm very solid with my decision of not to play the game of basketball.
They decided not to because Michael Jordan had already bowed out of his career of basketball to go into a baseball career. And unfortunately, that left the film on a shelf for a while, until Michael Jordan came back in 1995-1996 for his new basketball career after his failure at baseball. And so it was Wheels Up, and the movie got made and it was released in 1996, 25 years ago. And that movie was essentially a fictionalized account of what happened during his time between 1993 when he stopped playing and when he started playing again. And it's definitely fictionalized, because of the whole Looney Tunes thing. And so the entire thing of this movie is technically a brand recognition of not only the Looney Tunes license, but also of Michael Jordan as a player, because he was just returning to basketball at this point, and they needed something to reinvigorate his career, or at least I assume anyway. That's just an assumption. So, yeah. So this entire first movie is an advertising campaign that's based off of another advertising campaign. So keep that in mind, because I think that is the reason why I'm not necessarily keen on this new one either. The new one is nothing more to me than an advertisement for HBO Max, while I was also watching it on HBO Max. The entire thing, it just blew my mind as to the extent of the self-awareness, the corporate sellout self-awareness that was just ingrained into this film. Like, the whole thing was all conjured up by an algorithm, mind you, an algorithm, which, if you know anything about the film industry, there are some studios now that are looking to AI-generated scripts and generated ideas for how to make the most money. Yeah, you can't be more self-aware than that. So this whole algorithm makes this entire world, this entire universe, this serververse, so that people can go and be in their favorite movies and to experience them. So basically, the Oasis from Ready Player One with extra steps. See, in Ready Player One, all you had to do was wear the Oasis goggles and maybe a haptic feedback suit, and that was it. In this one, they just make a completely digital copy of you, and you get to experience it yourself, with all the haptic feedback and whatever just ingrained into this weird digital ball thing. And so basically this entire movie is just, or at least most of this entire serververse, is just an excuse to be like, hey, here's a fun pop culture reference. Hey, here's another fun pop culture reference. Not realizing that these pop culture references just dilute the brands that they are from. They just kind of turn the things that they have made into amusement park attractions, and it's just like, if you wanted to do that, just make a theme park. We all know you're envious of, Universal Studios and Disneyland. Just make your own theme park. Jesus Christ, you don't have to be this straightforward with the fact that you just want a theme park. The very fact that they just take all these movies and just turn them into planets that like people can go to and just be like, hey, I'm going to experience working with Superman, or I'm going to, you know, be part of the Matrix, and I'm going to be the one. And it's just, to me, it just dilutes the brand and the hard work and effort of the original writers and directors and people who made those movies possible, just for them to be marketed once again as marketable plushies, to say the meme correctly. And so basically, that's one of my biggest issues with this film, is that the film is too self-aware of the fact that it's a marketing gimmick. That the entire whole thing that started this whole thing is the fact that this algorithm wanted to make this sort of collaborative ad campaign to be like, yeah, we're going to work together, me and King James, we're going to market this, like, Oasis knockoff thing, and just, and just make it like that. And when he disagrees, he kidnaps his son and forces him to play basketball by trying to find a team made out of the Looney Tunes. And so the entire story is, you know, LeBron James having to save his son and to get out of the serververse by playing in a basketball game. And if he loses, he stays there forever. That whole stuff, you know, it's there. I think the story between LeBron James and his son is, I don't think it's his real son. I could be wrong on that. You know, is actually kind of decent. It's basically a story about how his dad doesn't really acknowledge that his son has actual wants and needs and has his own talents. And rather than, you know, saying like initially, hey, you have cool talents, let's invest in that. No, apparently LeBron James in this film is just too focused on basketball that he wants to be the most toxic parent ever and say, you can only do basketball because that's the one thing I was good at and you're going to do it. And it's just like, okay, cool, nice. And so by the end of the movie, lessons are learned. LeBron learns to be a better parent and all that cool stuff. I think the story for much of it, it's fine. Like, on top of the fact that, like, this film is built off of, like, IPs and just, like, acknowledging that this film is bullshit and that it hopes that you'll forgive it for just having a little fun with it. Sure, it's fun. I just wasn't a big fan of it, personally speaking. I think the best part about this whole movie, though, is Don Cheadle as Ali G. He just has so much energy in this movie. And he just runs circles around everyone. He's his own Looney Tune character. And he even, at one point, turns into a goddamn Looney Tune. It's hilarious. His whole performance is hilarious, and I loved it, right? I think he just chews up the scenery. He becomes his own sort of, like, fun villain. And yeah, he's, you know, a control freak, but he's also kind of fun in his own weird way. You know, again, there's some nice things about this movie. I think most of the voice acting is fine. I think most of the animation is okay for the 2D animation. Although, with one thing with the voice acting, I did notice with LeBron James a couple times, using headphones, of course, that I noticed that there was a little bit of a reverb in some of his audio in places where there shouldn't be reverb. And it's like, I think he might have, like, recorded it in a room that didn't have enough sound padding. So, not entirely sure exactly what went wrong here. I'm not entirely sure if he had to record those lines from home because of the pandemic, or maybe Warner Brothers had, like, a problem with the sound studio. I'm not entirely sure. But everyone else in the film, in terms of the animated voice lines, actually did a pretty decent job, and they all sounded crisp and clean, and they were edited like they needed to be. But LeBron James at times sounded like he was in a room that didn't have enough sound padding. That's just a small little technical thing. It doesn't overall hurt the film. I noticed it. I don't know if anyone else will notice it, but it is something I noticed. So, all in all, I think the thing that doesn't necessarily ruin this movie, but it's something that I'm not surprised with, is like when we go from a film that's already a marketing ploy to celebrate Looney Tunes and Michael Jordan to going to another movie where it's nothing but an advertisement for the brand of LeBron James and Warner Brothers Archives and especially HBO Max and Game of Thrones, Harry Potter, fucking DC Comics, you know, all the 9 yards. You know, it's like you're not really surprised by that if you know the history of the original movie. But I'm just like, at this point, it is emblematic of how far studios are willing to go with their own self-deprecation, that it doesn't become funny anymore. It more or less becomes sad, because at the end of the day, they don't invest money in like newer projects, and thus they do stuff like this to generate the money that they need. And it's just like, okay. But the other big thing is that this is not necessarily a sequel to the original Space Jam, but rather a reboot that it's set in our reality, but they know of the original movie for some reason. And the ending kind of makes things a little weirder too, because, like, spoilers for the ending. Bugs Bunny dies via some stupid shit, and apparently in the real world, Bugs is there. So is this set in a universe with Back in Action? Because we know that Looney Tunes, like, how does any of this work? Like, you give me an ending like that, and it's just like, what am I supposed to do with it? I don't know what I'm supposed to do with this. But anyway, it was a very confusing ending. But aside from all that, I think Space Jam: A New Legacy is a fine movie if the IP doesn't distract you enough. This movie has a decent-ish conflict between the father and the son in the movie, and it's fine. It's entertaining to watch, and you just kind of go with it and just be like, oh, it's fun. But if you are a little bit more critically minded of, like, current Hollywood trends, you're definitely not going to like this movie as much. I certainly didn't. So, yeah, I'm going to give Space Jam: A New Legacy a C-. Thank you guys so much for watching my review of Space Jam: A New Legacy, and be sure to check out for more reviews coming soon. I definitely will be talking about Black Widow soon, but first, I want to talk about Loki. So, we'll see you in the next review. Peace.